I wanted to ask you about the family tax deferral program. Can you explain it, who it's aimed at, and what the purpose of this is?
It will be for the families with children under 18 years of age. If they choose to, they'll be able to defer their property tax as long as they have a child under 18 years of age at home. And it will actually provide them with additional resources now if they choose to have those. It will be very similar to the seniors property tax deferral program that we've had in British Columbia for a number of years now.
When do they have to start paying? Like
Well, if they decided to sell their property, they would have to, obviously they'd have to pay that. If they decided, if they stay in their home and they pass away, then it's sold upon, it's met upon the completion of that. It's very similar, it will be very similar to the seniors program. It really is saying that we understand that families have additional costs as a result of the fact they have children. If they decide to take advantage of this, then they'll have the opportunity.
Each outlines a lot of administrative changes, regulatory changes, environmental assessment stuff. I mean, how does that help the economy in the short run, or in the period that needs to reasonably be kickstarted?
Well, let me give you an example. Currently, there are about $3 billion of projects that are tied up in Ottawa in the Canadian environmental assessment process. There's no timeline on that. There's no time frame on that. There's no new science that's applied. And frankly, if you have duplication in these processes, it adds costs, it adds uncertainty, and frankly, it drives jobs out of the economy. So what we're saying quite clearly is you have to have a thorough process. It's got to be based on sound science. It's got to have some time frames around it. We think we can work in partnership with the federal government to bring that in, and we're glad to be a prototype for them to see how that works. But that would free up about $3 billion of investment alone for the province of British Columbia. I can't tell you what it is right now tied up in Canadian environmental assessment processes, but those are projects that have already passed through British Columbia's environmental assessment process.
You've been pushing that for a little while, though, have you not? What changes here?
This says this is an important part of our agenda. We're going to continue to push it. You know, one of the things that I think we have to recognize, you have to be committed to the long term to these issues. We've also been pushing open skies for some time. The fact of the matter is, all governments in Canada have spent the last year and a bit focusing public sector resources on driving investments and jobs. We cannot afford any longer to say to private sector resources, we don't need you. We need them. We can open up a number of major capital projects in energy, major capital projects in mining, major initiatives that will actually bring people back into the workforce using the private sector's dollars. There's nothing here that suggests you shouldn't be thorough in the review process and the approval process, but duplication adds costs, duplication adds uncertainty, and we can't, Canada's taxpayers and British Columbian taxpayers can't afford that any longer.
What's the response from Ottawa to that so far?
It's actually, they are very encouraging in their response. I've had an opportunity to meet with Minister Prentice with regard to it. I've met with Senator Neufeld with regard to it. I've met with the Prime Minister with regard to it. And my experience is you have to continue on these and be persistent on them. I think it's a smarter way to make sure that we protect our environment and we encourage economic activity. We all have to understand in Canada, this is a new world that we live in. This isn't the world that we lived in even 5 years ago. This is a new world. Everyone is looking for private sector investment. So we can have smarter regulation, smarter processing, faster processing times. That's going to generate jobs for British Columbians in every part of the province.
Are you looking at amalgamate?
We'll try to go one at a time.
Will increasing accountability and transparency BC Ferries involve new legislation?
It will we'll have some significant announcements, but the most important thing I think is to recognize that BC Ferries has been well run. There are some challenges that we face with BC Ferries in terms of openness and accountability, transparency. We will be dealing with those. There will likely have to be some legislation, but you'll hear more about that in the weeks ahead.
Are you looking at amalgamate?
Premier, how are you going to make housing cheaper?
Well, I think we have to look at all of the processes that are in place, and when we talk about affordable housing, ask ourselves whether we are making housing affordable or more expensive, more costly. So I think that it's possible, it should be possible for governments to work together. We're working on behalf of the same citizens. We should be able to look at how we can bring processes together and think about what are our real goals. My goal is to make sure that young families know that they can live in communities across this province, and if they decide they want to buy a single family home, we will make them as cost effective as possible as we do that. That will take a lot of work. We'll work with municipalities on it. But just as we look at the federal government and we say to them, let's have smarter processes where we meet one another's objectives, So I think we can do that with municipal governments.
So do you have anything specific? I mean, what tools do provincial and municipal governments have to lower the cost of housing?
Well, there's a number. I mean, you have to look at what drives the cost of housing. So one is building costs, another is land cost, another is processing, another is time, how much time it takes to do things. This is something I think that we can do with municipalities in partnership. It's something I think should excite all municipalities across the province. They say that they want to deal with affordable housing. The only way you can build an affordable housing stock is to make sure that you're keeping your costs as reasonable as possible.
Is there a financial hit, by the way, to municipalities with this property tax deferral program?
No.
Does that affect their revenues at
No,
all?
no.
Can you explain how big a deal that tax deferral thing is in terms of how many people you think might take advantage of it and what it will mean for people?
Well, I can't tell you. I actually honestly can't give you the answer to that. There are about 300 to 400,000 families with children. Some will decide to take advantage of it and some of them won't. It will depend what your property taxes are in your particular community. Property taxes are likely higher in Vancouver than they may be in another community. So the benefits are there. What really will have to happen is there'll have to be an equity component in the home. It won't be something that doesn't, you can't launch into this without an equity component, and this will be laid out in detail when we introduce it, but there'll have to be an equity component in the home, and over the period of time, home values go up. So the best example I can use is my own, right? When I bought my home when my kids were young, before they were 18, it was substantially less expensive than when they were 18. This program would allow families to take advantage of it, have cash in hand as opposed to send it in. It will be a cost against their home, and when they decide to sell their home, that will be met. So, for example, if I decided to sell my home when my son Nicholas became 18, I would have had less that I would have been able to take out of the sale, but I would have been able to cover it easily.
Premier, your throne speeches in your first term and your second term all had one big idea in them. I've been through this one twice. I can't find even one small idea. What would you say?
Why am I
is the big
surprised
idea?
by that
What's the
that
big idea?
analysis?
Well, what's the big idea in this one?
I think,
Is there one?
Yes, I think there is, and I think that
And it is?
it's challenging though, because it may not be usual, a typical one. I think what we're saying here is we will use this Olympic opportunity to really set a course of action for us that encourages a change in our economy, that encourages us to improve the environment at the same time we're doing that looks out to 2030 and says, what do we imagine we want British Columbia to be like in 2030? As we take those steps in that direction, it will mean new energy initiatives, it will mean investing in the future, it will mean investing in our kids, it will mean reforming our education system, it will mean assuring that we actually take full advantage of the opportunities that being Canada's Pacific Gateway present. We are going to be introduced to the world over the next couple of weeks. We're going to use that as a launching pad to the future, and I actually believe that if British Columbians can imagine the kind of province they want in 2030, we can accomplish that, but we have to get started.
Are you going to be amalgamating?
Thank you. With regard to the preschool for 3 and 4 year olds, would that be part of the education system that would be free to parents for their kids?
It will be voluntary. We'll work with the parents as well as the private sector. There's a lot of people in the private sector that are already providing that. One of the critical things I think with 3 and 4 year old voluntary preschool is we have to have those preschools located close to where people live. The stories from young families today about traveling at 4 in the morning to be in a lineup for a preschool, that actually it's not smart. So we can't do this overnight, but we will be working with the private sector. We'll find opportunities in communities across the province. We'll look at our existing public plan and say, how can we use that to actually raise up those opportunities? And we'll get on with it because we expect it to be completed within 5 years.
Are you going to be amalgamating or eliminating?
Schools staffed by BCTF.
No, not necessarily.
Are you going to be amalgamating or eliminating any school boards?
We're going to work on improving school districts across the province, and really what we're focusing on here is individual students and what their needs. When we look at what we're investing in education right now, we're investing the highest amount ever per capita in students in British Columbia. We think we have an opportunity here through investing in early childhood development and preschool opportunities to really meet the needs of individual students. So that's what we're going to focus on. We're going to focus on enhancing the inclusion of parents in our education system. We're going to focus on including teachers and providing the best possible education for people. And we'll see how those discussions all meet out at the end. At the end of the day, what we want to be sure of is that every parent in British Columbia says, I'm really pleased that my child is in British Columbia's public education system. To do that, you have to focus on the child.